Hello everyone, welcome to Let's Crack UPSC CSE English. In our today's marathon session, we'll learn about Indian Constitution at Work, NCERT book of class 11th. So we'll complete this NCERT book in our marathon series. So today's first part. So let's start session. Before that, it's my pleasure to welcome you all on Unacademy, India's largest learning platform, where you will get unlimited access for live and recorded classes. Those aspirants are pursuing their graduation or after their 12th examination, planning for UPSC CSE preparation, they can opt for our iconic subscription. Yes, which means in this iconic subscription, you will get all the features of plus courses along with additional features like personal guidance, study planners and material, expert guidelines and test analysis. It's me Rushikesh Inamdar guiding UPSC aspirants from last 8 years. You can follow me on Unacademy and you can join our Telegram group using this link. Those aspirants facing financial challenges to continue their UPSC CSE preparation, Unacademy is providing now loan for those UPSC aspirants on Unacademy platform. So nothing can stop you without this program and you can chase your UPSC dream with Unacademy. So this is the link you can use to apply for loan. These are the paid subscription available on our platform, plus and iconic subscription. Here you can use referral code RBI Live to get 10% discount. Friends, we are providing combo subscription as well. For 1 year, 2 year and 3 year subscription you can opt and you will get 10% discount after using referral code RBI Live. So why I am insisting you to use referral code RBI Live? So after enrolling yourself with this code, we will guide you and I'll personally observe your preparation progress. These are the new batches starting from 5th May. We have 1 year, 2 year and NCERT batches. We are providing free test series and Unacademy Combat. So Unacademy Combat we are conducting on every Sunday morning 11 AM. So you can enroll yourself for Unacademy Combat using code RBI Live. It's absolutely free. So we'll start today's session. Indian Constitution at Work. So we'll cover class 11th NCERT. So friends, NCERT are the best, yes, and best source to prepare for UPSC CSE. Now, during the time these NCERT books clear your concept and definitely it will help to boost up your preparation for UPSC CSE. Now in this NCERT, what we will cover, so class 11th NCERT, we will cover, it's all about constitution. So like constitution and constitution, why and how we'll cover in first chapter. Then rights in the Indian Constitution. Then election and representation. executive, legislature, judiciary, federalism, local governments, constitution as living document, and the philosophy of the Indian constitution. So friends, one of the important NCERT for the preparation of our civil services examination. So its fundamental duties. So now we'll see the fundamental duties before going to start today's chapter. So in our Constitution of India, fundamental duties are mentioned in part 4A, and Article 51A is talking about the fundamental duties. So it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to abide by Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and the national anthem. As we know, fundamental duties are not enforceable. Yes. Then second, to cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national freedom and national struggle for freedom. Yes, as we know how national struggle for freedom was important to get freedom from Britishers. So fundamental duties talked about to cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national struggle for freedom. To uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. So being citizen, it's our duty to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. It's our duty to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, regional and sectional diversities, to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of woman. Yes, all these duties mentioned to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture, to protect and improve the natural environment including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures, to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform, and to safeguard public property and to abjure violence, to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity so that the nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavor and achievement, and whose parent or guardian to provide opportunities for education to his child, or as the case may be what between the age of 6 and 14 years. So these are the fundamental duties mentioned in our constitution. So friends, during the series we will cover all these duties once again in detail. So just this is introductory part to fundamental duties mentioned in our constitution. So friends, this article 51A was inserted by the 42nd Constitution Amendment Act 1976, and these duties with effect from 3rd January 1977. and this last duty related to the opportunities for education was inserted in the Constitution by 86th Amendment Act 2002 with effect from 1 April 2010. Yes. Now we'll start our today's first chapter, that is Constitution, why and how. So the Constitution, now we have to ask basic question, why Constitution and how. So we'll start with the introduction. So basically this NCERT book of 11th class is about the working of the Indian Constitution, where we will read information about various aspects of the working of our Constitution, where we will cover the various institutions of the government in our country and their relationship with each other, how they are working and coordinate with each other to performing their duties. So before we begin to read about elections, governments and president and prime minister, it is necessary to understand that the entire structure of the government and the various principles that bind the institutions of government have their origin in the Constitution of India. So friends, when we are studying Constitution, so government, president, prime minister, council of ministers, these are the institutions, and it is necessary to understand the entire structure of government to learn about these institutions. So after studying this first chapter, we will comment over what its constitution means, what a constitution does to society, and how constitutions govern the allocation of power in society, and what was the way in which the Constitution of India was made. So the answer of all these questions we'll get after the completion of this chapter. So friends, let's start. Why do we need a constitution? So with the various stories and examples, we'll understand this NCERT. So after completion of this marathon session, you can just revise your handwritten notes, and in this marathon series we will cover complete NCERTs page by page. So now, what is constitution? What are its functions? What role does it perform for a society? And how does a constitution relate to our daily existence? So when, with a long gap of our preparation, like school studies or college studies, if a fresher candidate start NCERTs, and initially everyone facing challenges to understand or recall what we have studied in that particular standard. But friends, there should be a role of our education system, where in school or colleges we were focusing on only marks and results. So when we are talking about civil services examination preparation, it will shape you, or which will force you to become a knowledgeable person and understand all the subjects thoroughly, and you can interlink all these subjects with each other. So just enjoy the NCERT of 11th standard, where we'll start Constitution allow coordination and assurance. Now, how Constitution allows coordination and assurance? Now, with the example and story, imagine yourself to be a member of a reasonably large group, and further imagine that this group has following characteristics. So here is the story or the example to understand Constitution allows coordination and assurance. Now just imagine that you are a member of a reasonably large group. So the members of this group are diverse in various ways. So you can take an example when you are in school, or for next 5 minutes, just imagine that you are a school student and you are a member of one group. Yes, it's a large group, and member of your group are belongs from different religious allegiance, which means the member of these large groups, some are Hindus, some are Muslims, some Christians, and some perhaps profess no religion at all. They are also varied in many different respects. They pursue different professions. Now, come to the after your college or your professional life, you are also member of this reasonably large group, where the member of this group, they pursue different professions, have different abilities, have different hobbies, different tastes in everything from films to books. So as we know, when we are talking about even small group, so just recall group of your college, where every member of your group was favoring or was pursuing different hobbies, different tastes in the films or even books as well. So extracurriculum activity. During that period, everyone was associated with different activities. So same like this in this group all as well. All the members have different tastes from films to book. They are following various different religions. Now, some members of this group are rich, some are poor, some are old and some young. Imagine now further that members of this group are likely to have disputes over various aspects of life. So how much property should one be allowed to own? Should it compulsory that every child be sent to school, or should the parents be allowed to decide? Yes, now every member of the group having different opinion with all these questions. So how much should this group spend on its safety and security? Or should it build more parks instead? Should the group be allowed to discriminate against some its members? Yes, every question will elicit a variety of answers from different people. Means as per their thought process and their understanding, everyone will answer in different way. Now, but for all the diversity, this group has to live together in one environment, and they are dependent upon each other in various ways. Yes, the symbiosis, process of symbiosis is observed. Yes, they require the cooperation of each other. So what will enable the group to live together peacefully? Now answer the question. What will enable the group to live together peacefully? So just come out from that imagination part. Yes, friends. Now just come out this imagination part. So one may say that perhaps members of this group can live together if they can agree on some basic rules. So why will the group need certain basic rules? Yes, we are not started directly to think from. Alright. So why will the group need certain basic rules? So think of what would be in the absence of some basic rules. What will happen if there is no rule to live together? So every individual would be insecure simply because they would not know what members of this group could do to each other, who could claim rights over what, or any group will need some basic rules that are publicly promulgated and known to all members of that group. To achieve minimal degree of coordination, and but these rules must be not only be known, and they must also be enforceable. Yes. Now just come out from that imagination. Now just think about the citizen of any country. So if citizens have no assurance that others will follow these rules, they will themselves have no reason to follow these rules. Saying that the rules are legally enforceable gives an assurance to everybody that others will follow these. For if they do not do so, they will be punished. Which means if citizens of any country have no assurance for the rules created by the country, then definitely they will feel unsecure. And like this, the first function, yes, with this imagination will understand the first function so the first function here, understand the first function of the constitution. So the first function of a constitution is to provide a set of basic rules that allow for minimal coordination among members of a society. Yes. So friends, now just gear up your plans to learn NCERT. The first function of a constitution is to provide a set of basic rules that allow for minimal coordination among the members of a society. Yes, specification of decision making power. So a constitution is a body. A constitution is a body of fundamental principles and according to which a state constituted or governed. So constitution is the body of fundamental principles according to which a state is constituted or governed. But what should these fundamental rules be? And What makes them fundamental? So, well, the first question we will have to decide is who gets to decide who gets, yes, now understand who gets to decide what the laws governing the society should be. So, one member may want rule X, but others may want rule Y. Then, how do we decide whose rules or preferences should govern us? So, if we are talking about discussing in our groups generally, there are different opinions regarding same issue. Now, what opinion is correct? So, it's difficult to decide that. So, like this, when we are talking about rules for society, so some people want rule X, but others may want rule Y. And how do we decide whose rules or preferences should be govern us? So, we may think the rules we want everyone to live by are the best, but others think that their rules are the best. For example, anybody is demanding rule X and others group demanding rule Y, then how we will decide which rules are best or others are not feasible to follow? So, even before we decide what rules should govern this group, we have to decide who gets to decide about these rules. Which means when we are discussing about setting up rules, then who will authorized to decide these rules? So the constitution has to provide an answer to this question. Yes. So it specifies the basic allocation of power in a society. It decides who gets to decide what the laws will be. In principle, this question, who gets to decide, can be answered in many ways. Like in a monarchical constitution, a monarch decides. In some constitutions, like the old Soviet Union, one single party was given the power to decide. But in democratic constitutions, broadly speaking, the people get to decide. Yes, friends. Now come to the point where we are discussing who will decide rules for the society or a nation. So in monarchical constitution, a monarch decides rule for the country. In some constitutions like the old Soviet Union, one single party was given the power to decide rules for the country. But in democratic constitution, the people gets to decide their rules. But this matter is not so simple, as we have discussed about the group. Even in large group of people, they are not agree with all rules. So, because even if we answer that the people should decide, it will not answer the question. So, how should the people decide? For something to the law, should everyone agree to it? Should the people directly vote on each matter as the ancient Greeks did? Or country like India or other countries where population of that country is a large number, So how they can follow the rule of this voting for every matter. So in ancient Greeks, where the people directly vote on each matter and then they decide for the conclusion. So the question is that should the people express their preferences by electing representatives? But if the people act through their representatives, how should these representatives be elected and how many should be there? So the answer of these questions we will discuss. So friends, in the Indian Constitution, for example, it is specified that in most instances, Parliament gets to decide laws and policies, and the Parliament itself be organized in a particular manner. So before identifying what the law in any given society is, we have to identify who has the authority to enact it. So if Parliament has the authority to enact laws, there must be a law that bestows this authority on Parliament in the first place, and this is the function of the Constitution. It is an authority that constitutes government in the first place. Yes, friends. Now, if we are talking about example of our Indian Constitution, where our Parliament gets to decide laws and policies, and that Parliament itself be organized in a particular manner. So the friends, the second function of a constitution is to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society, and it decides how the government will be constituted. So second function of a constitution is to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society, and it decides how the government will be constituted. Now friends, just recap the first function of the constitution, then we'll start the second function as well. Yes, first function of a constitution is to provide a set of basic rules that allow for minimal coordination amongst member of a society. And second rule, that is second function of a constitution, is to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society. It decides how the government will be constituted. Now just look at this cartoon given in NCERT. So friends, countries of European Union tried to create a European constitution and the attempt failed. So here is a cartoonist impression of this attempt. So does this always happen in any constitution making? The founding fathers So countries of the European Union tried to create European constitution, and that attempt was failed. Now we'll see limitations on the powers of government. So the function of the constitution, it is an authority that constitutes government in the first place, but it is clearly not enough. So limitations on the powers of government. So suppose we decide who had the authority to make decisions, but then this authority passed laws and you thought were patently unfair. It prohibited you from practicing your religion, for instance, or it enjoyed that clothes of a certain color were prohibited, or that you were not free to sing certain songs, or that people who belong to a particular group, caste or religion, who always have to serve others and would not be allowed to retain any property, or that government could arbitrarily arrest someone, or that only people of certain skin color would be allowed to draw water from wells. We would obviously think these laws were unjust and unfair. So friends, if any government make law where the member of the society not able to enjoy these rules, which means there are restrictions to wearing clothes, there are restrictions to following any religion, there are restrictions to retain any property, and government by own or using arbitrary power arrest someone without reasons, or a specific group of people or people of certain skin color would be allowed to draw water from wells, which means the public facilities are available to specific group of people, then definitely we will feel or think these laws were unjust and unfair. There is no equality in these laws. So even though they were passed by a government that had come to existence based on certain procedures, so there would be something obviously unjust about that government which enacting these laws. So limitations on the powers of government should be there. So arbitrary, they are not using the powers. So now the third function of a constitution is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens, and these limits are fundamental in the sense that government may never trespass them. So third function of a constitution is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens, and these limits are fundamental in the sense that government may never trespass their citizens. Now, constitutions limit the power of government in many ways. So, constitution limit the power of government in many ways, and the most common way of limiting the power of government is to specify certain fundamental rights that all of us possesses as citizens, and which no government can ever be allowed to violate these fundamental rights. So friends, here we can understand how constitutions limit the power of a government to enforcing various laws to providing rights to the citizens in the form of fundamental rights. Friends, constitution limiting power of government to establish arbitrary laws. So the exact content of interpretation of these rights varies from constitution to constitution, but most constitutions will protect a basic cluster of rights. So in the world context, in the context of world, if we talking about the basic laws, then these fundamental or basic laws or rights are mandatory for all citizens, and there is no any interfere by the governments to providing these rights to the citizen of a country. Yes, citizen will be protected from being arrested arbitrarily and for no reason, and this is one basic limitation upon the power of government. So citizens will normally have the right to some basic liberties like to freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, freedom of to conduct a trade or business, so friends, citizens will normally have the right to some basic liberties, to freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, freedom to conduct a trade or business. And in practice, these rights can be limited during times of national emergency, and the constitution specifies the circumstances under which these rights may be withdrawn. So in normal situation, citizen of a country getting all these rights and liberties to perform. Yes. Now we'll see aspirations and goals of a society. So friends, aspirations and goals of a society. Most of the older constitutions limited themselves largely to allocating decision making power and setting some limits to government power. But many 20th century constitutions, of which the Indian constitution is the finest example, and also provide an enabling framework for the government to do certain positive things, and to express the aspirations and goals of society. So the Indian Constitution was particularly innovative in this respect. Now, the Indian Constitution was particularly innovative in this respect. So societies with deep entrenched inequalities of various kinds will not only have to set limits on the power of government, they will also have to enable the empower the government to take positive measures to overcome forms of inequality or deprivation. So most of the older constitutions limited themselves largely to allocating decision making power and setting up some limits to government power. And the Indian Constitution was particularly innovative in this respect. So in our Constitution is providing equality to everyone. So example, where India aspires to be a society that is free of caste discrimination. If this is our society's aspiration, the government will have to enable or empowered to take all necessary steps to achieve this goal. In a country like South Africa, which had a deep history of racial discrimination, so its new constitution had to enable the government to end racial discrimination. So here we can thanks to our forefathers or countries which leadership during that they failed or make law in our country. Everyone will get equal opportunity in employment, in education, and in public facilities. So there is example of South Africa where earlier they were facing or they had deep history of racial discrimination, and after that a new constitution had to enable the government of Africa to end racial discrimination. But in our India, our forefathers or our leaders of Constituent Assembly, they aware about the fact of discrimination, and they already aware how our society will develop with the equality to all. Now there is one cartoon in our NCERT. So the constitution makers to address themselves to very different aspirations. So here is in this picture a Nehru trying to balance between different visions and ideologies. Yes, friends. So there are various demands by the members, but our constitution makers met medieval or middle way to solve this concern. Yes, so more positively, a constitution may enshrine the aspirations of a society. The framers of the Indian constitution, for example, thought that each individual in society should have all that necessary for them to lead a life of minimal dignity and social self-respect. Yes, so minimum material. So more positively, a constitution may enshrine the aspirations of a society. The framers of the Indian constitution, for example, thought that each individual in a society should have all that is necessary for them to lead life of minimal dignity and social self-respect. So minimum material, well-being, education, etc. And the Indian constitution enables the government to take positive welfare measures, some of which are legally enforceable. And as we go on studying the Indian constitution, we shall find that each enable provision have the support of the preamble of our constitution, and these provisions are found in the section of fundamental rights, the directive principles of state policy, DPSPs, and also enjoy government to fulfill certain aspirations of the people. So our constitution is talked about fundamental rights, DPSPs, to take appropriate decisions for the well-being of our society. Now, the fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society and create conditions for a just society. So the fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspiration of a society and create conditions for a just society. So just have a recap of the functions of constitution, where the first function of a constitution is to provide a set of basic rules that allow for minimal coordination amongst members of a society. Then second rule or second function of a constitution is to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society. So it decides how the government will be constituted. Then third function is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens, and these limits are fundamental in the sense or nature that government may never trespass them. Yes, so these limits are fundamental in the sense and that government may never trespass them. And then fourth function is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society and create conditions for a just society. Now, enabling provisions of the Constitution. So friends, constitutions are not only rules and regulations controlling the powers of the government, so they also give powers to the government for pursuing collective good for the society. So, constitutions are not only rules and regulations controlling the powers of the government, they also give powers to the government for pursuing collective good of the society. So, Constitution of South Africa assigns many responsibilities to the government. It wants the government to take measures to promote conservation of nature, make efforts to persons or groups subjected to unfair discrimination, and provides that the government must progressively ensure adequate housing to all, healthcare, etc. In the case of Indonesia also, the government is enjoined to establish and conduct national education system. So the Indonesian constitution ensures that the poor and destitute children will be looked after by the government. So enabling provisions of the constitution. So here is the example of South Africa and Indonesia. Now, we'll discuss fundamental identity of a people. Finally, and perhaps even most importantly, a constitution expresses the fundamental identity of a people. This means the people as a collective entity come into being only through the basic constitution. It is by agreeing to a basic set of norms about how one should be governed and who should be governed that one forms of a collective identity. So one has many sets of identities that exist prior to a constitution, but by agreeing to certain basic norms and principles, one constitutes one's basic political identity. And second, constitutional norms are the overarching framework within which one pursues individual aspirations, goals, and freedoms. So the constitution sets authoritative constraints upon what one may or may not do. So it defines the fundamental values that we may not trespass. So the constitution also gives one moral identity. So fundamental identity of people, where constitution gives basic set of norms. So how one should be governed and who should be governed. So constitutional norms are the overarching framework within which one pursue individual aspirations, goals and freedoms. So constitution authorize government to take care of fundamental rights of a citizen. And third and finally, it may be case that many basic political and moral values are now shared across different constitutional traditions. So if one looks at constitutions around the world, they differ in many respects. In the form of government, they enjoy in many procedural details, but they also share a good deal. So most modern constitutions create a form of government that is democratic in some respects. Most claim to protect certain basic rights, but constitutions are different in the way they embody conception of national identity. So worldwide we can say there are same basic rules, but the implementation of these rules vary from country to country, and most nations are an amalgamation of a complex set of historical traditions. They weave together the diverse group that reside within the nation in different ways. For example, German identity was constituted by being ethnically German, and the constitution gave expression to this identity. While the Indian constitution does not make ethnic identity a criteria for citizenship, and different nations embody different conceptions of what the relationship between the different regions of a nation and the central government should be. So this is relationship constitutes the national identity of a country. So in the world's context, every nation has different policies for the criteria of citizenship. Some countries align ethnic identity, but in our country, India, or Indian constitution does not make any ethnic identity a criteria for citizenship. Now we'll see the authority of a constitution. So we have outlined some of the functions of a constitution reforms, and these functions explain why most societies have a constitution. But there are three further questions we can ask about constitutions. What is a constitution? How effective is a constitution? And is a constitution just? So in most countries, constitution is a compact document that comprises a number of articles about the state, specifying how the state is to be constituted and what norms it should follow. So when we ask for the constitution of a country, we are usually referring to this document. But some countries, the United Kingdom for instance, do not have one single document that can be called constitution. So the authority of a constitution where most countries constitution is a compact document which comprises number of articles about the state. So state should follow these norms as per the compact document. So when we ask for the constitution of country, we are usually referring to this document. But some countries like United Kingdom do not have one single document that can be called a constitution. So rather they have a series of documents and decisions that taken collectively are referred to as the constitution. Yes, so like in the United Kingdom, they have series of documents and decisions that taken collectively are referred to as constitution. So we can say that constitution is the document or set of documents that seeks to perform the functions that we discussed earlier. So many constitutions around the world exist only on paper. They are mere words existing on a parchment. The crucial question is, how effective is a constitution and what makes it effective? What ensures that it has a real impact on the lives of people? Making a constitution effective depends upon many factors. So friends, here we have to understand in regards with the constitution. So there are, in some countries, the constitutions exist only on paper, but the implementation of these rules or constitution is very important. So the real impact of those rules and constitution on the lives of people, then we'll understand mode of promulgation. Yes, this refers to how a constitution come into being, who crafted the constitution and how much authority did they have. Now in many countries, constitutions remain defunct because they are crafted by military leaders or leaders who are not popular but do not have the ability to carry the people with them. So the most successful constitutions like India, South Africa and the United States are constitutions which were created in the aftermath of popular national movements. Yes, so here we have to understand in many countries in the world where their constitutions are not functionalized because these constitutions are drafted by military leaders or unpopular leaders. So these leaderships do not have ability to convince their people to follow constitution. But on the other hand, we can discuss the example of India, South Africa and United States of America, where they created constitution aftermath of popular national movements. So here we'll understand India's constitution was formally created by a constituent assembly between December 1946 and November 1949, where it drew upon a long history of the nationalist movement that had a remarkable ability to take along different sections of Indian society together. So now come to the Indian context. Where our constitution, formally created by the Constituent Assembly between December 1946 and November 1949. So there was event of or historical events, we can say freedom struggle or nationalist movement had remarkable ability to take along different sections of Indian society together, and the impact of such thought process reflecting in our constitution. So the constitution drew enormous legitimacy from the fact that it was drawn up by people who enjoyed immense public credibility, who had the capacity to negotiate and command the respect of a wide cross section of a society, and who were able to convince the people that the constitution was not an instrument for the aggrandizement of their personal power. So the final document reflected the broad national consensus at the time, and some countries have subjected their constitution is a full-fledged referendum where all the people vote on the desirability of the constitution. Now, when the Indian constitution was never subject to such a referendum, but nevertheless carried enormous public authority because it had a consensus and backing of leaders who were themselves popular. So although the constitution itself was not subjected to a referendum and the people adopted it as their own abiding by its provisions, and therefore the authority of the people who enact the constitution helps determine in part its prospects for success. So now we will discuss a neighboring country, Nepal, where the debate over constitution making. So making a constitution. So friends, I hope Are you aware about recent developments in Nepal regarding formation of their constitution? In our previous NCERT sessions, we have discussed example of struggle and movement of the people of Nepal to form democratic government. Now we'll cover debate over constitution making in Nepal, where making a constitution is not always an easy and smooth affair, where Nepal is an example of the complicated nature of constitution making. So since 1948, Nepal had 5 constitutions. In 1948, after 3 years, again in 1951, then 1959, 1962 and 1990. But all these constitutions were granted by the King of Nepal. The 1990 constitution introduced a multi-party competition, though the king continued to hold final powers in many respects. And for many years, Nepal was faced with militant political agitations for restructuring the government. So the main issue was the role of the monarchy in the constitution of Nepal. So some groups in Nepal wanted to abolish the institution of monarchy and establish republican form of government. Others believe that it may be useful to shift to limited monarchy with a reduced role for the king. The king himself was not ready to give powers. He took overall powers in October 2002. So many political parties and organizations demanded the formation of a new constituent assembly. The Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist, was in the forefront of the struggle for a popularly elected constituent assembly. And finally, under the pressure of popular agitation, the king had to install a government acceptable to the agitating parties. That is 7-party alliance. If you remember, they started agitation to establish democracy in Nepal. Sorry. And after that, this 7-party alliance, supported by various organizations and parties, to establish democratic government in Nepal. So this government has stripped the king almost all powers, and in 2008, Nepal emerged as a democratic republic after abolishing the monarchy, and finally Nepal adopted a new constitution in 2015. So these are the events happened in Nepal over constitution making. Then the substantive provisions of a constitution. So now just see the basic functions of the constitution. First function of a constitution is to provide a set of basic rules that allow for minimal coordination amongst members of a society. Then the second function of a constitution is to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society. It decides how the government will be constituted. Then third function of a constitution is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens, and these limits are fundamental in the sense that government may never trespass them. And fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society and create conditions for a just society. Now, after the debate over constitution making in Nepal, we'll see the substantive provisions of a constitution. The substantive provisions of a constitution. It is the hallmark of a successful constitution that it gives everyone in society some reason to go along with its provisions. It is the hallmark of successful constitution that it gives everyone in society some reason to go along with its provisions. A constitution that, for instance, allowed permanent majorities to oppress minority groups within society would give minorities no reason to go along with the provision of the constitution. Or a constitution that systematically privileged some members at the expense of others, or that systematically entrenched the power of small groups in a society, would cease to command allegiance, and if any group feels their identity is being stifled, they will have no reason to abide by the constitution. So no constitution by itself achieves perfect justice, but it has to convince people that it provides the framework for pursuing basic justice. So we can do the experiment. So we can ask ourselves the question, what would be the content of some basic rules in society? So when such that they give everyone a reason to go along with them. So the more constitution preserves the freedom and equality of all its members, the more likely it is to succeed. So does the Indian constitution, broadly speaking, give everyone a reason to go along with its broad outlines? And after studying it, we should be able to answer the question in the affirmative. So the substantive provisions of a constitution were freedom and equality for the all sections of society. The basic principle is for the justice for all. Now, balanced institutional design. There should be balanced institutional design in constitution. So constitutions are often subverted not by the people but by small groups, so who wish to enhance their own power well-crafted constitutions fragment power in society intelligently so that no single group can subvert the constitution. So, one way of such intelligent designing of a constitution is to ensure that no single institution acquires monopoly of power. This is often done by fragmenting power across different institutions. The Indian Constitution, for example, horizontally fragments power across different institutions like the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. So, and even dependent statutory bodies like the election commission. So, there should be balanced institutional design. So, when we are talking about performing their duties, all these institutions to be considered a rule of coordination and ultimately helping society in their basic rules of duties. So, where we are distributing powers to all these institutions, then definitely they will work for the upliftment of marginalized section, and they will provide equal opportunity to all. So an intelligent system of checks and balances has facilitated the success of the Indian Constitution. So another important aspect of intelligent institutional design is that a constitution must strike the right balance between certain values, norms, and procedures as authoritative, and at the same time allow enough flexibility in its operations to adapt to changing needs and circumstances. So, too rigid a constitution is likely to break under the weight of change, and a constitution that is on the other hand too flexible will give no security, which means successful constitutions strike the right balance between preserving core values and adapting them to new circumstances. So we will notice the wisdom of makers of the Indian Constitution, that is the Constitution as a living document, and the Constitution is described as a living document by striking a balance between the possibility to change the provisions and the limits on such changes. The Constitution has ensured that it will be survive as a document respected by people. The arrangement also ensures that no section or group can on its own subvert the Constitution, which means basic structure of Constitution is not diluted by these changes. So here is the example given in NCERT. So it's interesting, in complete book there are number of cartoon which will link to the scenarios So now in this cartoon, the theme, like why does the cartoonist describe the new Iraqi constitution as the castle of cards? As I hope everyone aware about the castle of cards. So would this description apply to the Indian constitution? Yes or no? So we will make our opinion at the end of the complete series. So after completion of the series for the 12th, 11th standard NCERT, how our constitution is formed on their principles. Now, therefore, in determining whether a constitution has authority, we can ask the three questions in this regard, like whether the people who enacted the constitution credible. Yes, were the people who enacted the constitution credible? This question will be answered in this remaining part of this chapter itself. Now next question is, did the constitution ensure that power was intelligently organized so that it was not easy for any group to subvert the constitution? And the most importantly, does the constitution give everyone some reason to go along with it? And is the constitution the locus of people's hopes and aspiration? The ability of the constitution to command voluntary allegiance of the people depends to a certain extent upon whether the constitution is just and what are the principles of justice underlying the Indian constitution. So we'll get answer of all these questions after completion of this complete NCERT. Now we'll see how was the Indian constitution made. Now friends, come to the point topic which relates. I hope thanks for bearing the meanings of world and general information about the constitution. Now we'll start interesting part. How was the Indian constitution made? So let us find out how the Indian constitution was made. And formally the constitution was made by the Constituent Assembly, which had been elected for undivided India. So the constitution was made by the Constituent Assembly, which had been elected for undivided India. So Constituent Assembly held its first sitting on 9th December 1946 and reassembled as Constituent Assembly for Divided India on 14th August 1947. So its members were chosen by indirect election by the members of the provincial legislative assemblies that had been established under the Government of India Act 1935. So the Constituent Assembly was composed roughly along the lines suggested by the plan proposed by the Committee of British Cabinet, known as the Cabinet Mission. I hope everyone aware about these facts, where our Constituent Assembly, which had been elected for undivided India, and it had its first sitting on 9 December 1946. But again, Constituent Assembly reassembled for divided India on 14th August 1947. So, the plan proposed by the committee of the British cabinet, that is cabinet mission. So according to this plan, each province and each princely state or group of states were allotted seats proportional to their respective population, roughly in the ratio 1 as to 10 lakhs. As a result, the provinces were to elect 292 members, while the princely state were allotted a minimum of 93 seats. The seats in each province were distributed among the three main communities like Muslims, Sikhs, and General in proportion to their respective populations. So members of each community in the provincial legislative assembly elected their own representatives by the method of proportional representation with single transferable vote, and the method of selection in the case of representative of princely states was to be determined by consultation. So how the Constituent Assembly was formed as per the suggested in the cabinet mission plan. Now, we'll see the composition of the Constituent Assembly in detail. Before that, just see there is one statement by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So, we must our political democracy, a social democracy as well. Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of its social democracy. What does social democracy mean? It means a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principles of life. These principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity are not to be treated as separate items in a trinity, and they form a union of trinity in the sense that to divorce one from the other is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. So liberty cannot be divorced from equality, equality cannot be divorced from liberty, and nor can liberty or equality be divorced from fraternity. Without equality, liberty would produce the supremacy of the few over the many, and equality without liberty would kill individual initiative. So without fraternity, liberty, and equality could not be become a natural course of things. So in this paragraph, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, CAD volume 11. Yes, here is the source given in NCERT of this paragraph. So, which talks about the important role of fraternity, liberty, and equality in the society to promote features of democracy. Now, friends, composition of the Constituent Assembly. Let's see the composition of the Constituent Assembly. So, as a consequences of the partition under the plan of 3 June 1947, those members who were elected from territories which fell under Pakistan ceased to be members of the Constituent Assembly. Yes, now we'll see composition of the Constituent Assembly. So, as a consequences of the partition under the plan of 3 June 1947, those members who were elected from territories which fell under Pakistan ceased to be members of the Constituent Assembly, and the number of members in the assembly was reduced to 299. Yes, the constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949, where 284 members were actually present on 24 January 1950 and appended their signature to the constitution as finally passed. The constitution came into force on 26 January 1950. The constitution was thus framed against the backdrop of the horrendous violence that the partition unleashed on the subcontinent, but it is a tribute to the fortitude of the framers that they were not only able to draft a constitution under immense pressure, but also learned the right lessons from the unimaginable violence that accompanied the partition. Now understand the immense pressure created after the partition. So friends, just relate events to our practical life. Now in civil services, we have to work hard with the pressure of society, but after or under this positive pressure, we can form a successful stories like our constitution. So the finally constitution came into force on 26 January 1950, and the constitution was committed to a new conception of citizen. Yes, a new conception of idea of citizenship, where not only would minorities be secure, but religious identity would be no bearing on citizenship rights. But this account of the composition of the Constituent Assembly that drafted the Constitution touches upon only the surface of how our Constitution was made. Although the members of the Assembly were not elected by universal suffrage, there was a serious attempt to make the Assembly representative body. Members of all religions were given representation under the scheme described above, and in addition, the Assembly had 28 members from the scheduled castes. So, in terms of political parties, the Congress dominated the assembly, occupying as many as 82% of the seats in the assembly after the partition, and the Congress itself was such a diverse party that it managed to accommodate almost all shades of opinion within it. So here we can understand the representation of all sections of the society into the Constituent Assembly, which will yes, so this representation from all the sections of society shown indigenous of thoughts and process for the making of constitution. Yes, after the composition of the Constituent Assembly, we'll see the principle of deliberation. The authority of the Constituent Assembly does not come only from the fact that it was broadly the not perfectly representative. So it comes from the procedures it adopted to frame the constitution and the values its members brought to their deliberations. So while in any assembly that claims to be representative, so it is desirable that diverse sections of the society participate. It is equally important that they participate not only as representative of their own identity or community. So each member deliberated upon the constitution with the interest of the whole nation in mind, and there were often disagreements among members, but few of these disagreements could be traced to members protecting their own interests. So in the working of Constituent Assembly, during the drafting our constitution, where the thumb rule is participation from all representatives, the discussions on almost all topics with the common opinion, pros and cons of the various development, so there were legitimate differences of principle and the differences were many. So should India adopt a centralized or decentralized system of government? Yes, these differences in these discussions of Constituent Assembly, for example, discussions over should India adopt a centralized or decentralized system of government? What should be the relations between the state and the center? What should be the powers of the judiciary? Should the constitution protect property rights? Almost every issue that lies at the foundation of a modern state was discussed with great sophistication. So, only one provision of the constitution was passed without virtually any debate. So the introduction of universal suffrage, meaning that all citizens reaching a certain age would be entitled to be voters irrespective of religion, caste, education. So while the members felt no need at all to discuss the issue of who should have the right to vote. So every other matter was seriously discussed and debated, and nothing can be better testament to the democratic commitment of this assembly. Yes, definitely there was differences on various issues, but the members of Constituent Assembly discussed all matters thoroughly with the logical support so the constitution drew its authority from the fact that members of the Constituent Assembly engaged in what one might call public reason. The members of the assembly placed a great emphasis on discussion and reasoned argument. They did not simply advance their own interests, but gave principled reason to other members for their positions. The very act of giving reasons to other makes you move away from simply a narrow consideration of your own interest, because you have to give reasons to others to make them go along with your viewpoint. The voluminous debates in the Constituent Assembly, where each clause of the Constitution was subjected to scrutiny and debate, so is a tribute to public reason at its best. And these debates deserve to be memorialized as one of the most significant chapters in the history of constitution making, and equal in importance to the French and American revolutions as well. So, during the making of constitution, there were various aspects to be considered to form common opinion on all issues. There were different opinions on the matter. Then these matters to be discussed. They're making common opinion on logical reasons behind that particular subject or matter. Now, see this picture where I hope now it's visible. So the President of the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and the Chairman of the Drafting Committee, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, greeting each other. So here the lines by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. He said that I have realized as nobody else could have with what zeal and devotion the members of the drafting committee and especially its chairman Dr. Ambedkar, in spite of his indifferent health, have worked. We could never make a decision which was or could be even so right as when we put him on the drafting committee and made him its chairman. He has not only justified his selection but has added luster to the work which he has done. So, in this connection, it would be invidious to make any distinction as among the other members of the committee, and I know they have all worked with the same zeal and devotion as its chairman, and they deserve the thanks of the country. So, the process of drafting our constitution was a big task, and all the members worked hard to come to the conclusion. Now we'll see the procedures. So the importance of public reason, what emphasized in the Union procedure of the assembly as well. The Constituent Assembly had 8 major committees on different subjects. So usually Jawaharlal Nehru, Rajendra Prasad, Sardar Patel or B.R. Ambedkar chaired these committees. These were not men who agreed with each other on many things. So Ambedkar had been bitter critic of the Congress and Gandhi, accusing them of not doing enough for upliftment of scheduled castes. So Patel and Nehru disagreed on many issues. Nevertheless, they all worked together. Yes. So in Constituent Assembly, there were 8 major committees on different subjects, and they chaired by eminent personalities like Jawaharlal Nehru, Rajendra Prasad, Sardar Patel or B.R. Ambedkar. Now, each committee usually drafted particular provisions of the constitution which were then subjected to debate by the entire assembly, and usually an attempt was made to reach a consensus with the belief that provisions agreed to by all would not be detrimental to any particular interests. So some provisions were subject to the vote, but in each instance, every single argument, query or concern was responded to with great care and in writing. The assembly met for 166 days, spread over 2 years and 11 months. Its sessions were open to the press and the public alike. So the Constituent Assembly met for 166 days, which spread over 2 years and 11 months. And its sessions were open to the press and the public alike. Now, we'll see the inheritance of the national movement with the forming or drafting our constitution. So, but no constitution is simply a product of assembly that produces it. So an assembly as diverse as the Constituent Assembly of India could not have functioned if there was no background, consensus on the main principles of the constitution should enshrine. So these principles were forged during the long struggle for freedom. So in a way, the Constituent Assembly was giving concrete shape and form to the principle set had inherited from the nationalist movement. So for decades preceding the promulgation of the constitution, the nationalist movement had debated many questions that were relevant to the making of the constitution. The shape and form of government India should have the values. It should uphold the inequalities. It should overcome. So answers forged in those debates were given their final form in the constitution. So inheritance of the nationalist movement. So the principles were forged during the long struggle for freedom, which means the Constituent Assembly was giving concrete shape and the form to the principles it had inherited from the nationalist movement. So motive behind formulating policies or the provisions in the constitution were backed by the or historic meanings of the nationalist movement. So perhaps the best summary of the principles that the nationalist movement brought to the Constituent Assembly is the objective resolution moved by Nehru in 1946. This resolution encapsulates the aspirations and values behind the constitution. So what the previous section terms as substantive provisions of the constitution is inspired by and summed up by the values incorporated in the objective resolution. So based on this resolution, our constitution gave institutional expression to these fundamental commitments like equality, liberty, democracy, sovereignty, and a cosmopolitan identity. Thus, our constitution is not merely a maze of rules and procedures, but a moral commitment to establish a government that will fulfill the many promises that the nationalist movement held before the people. So, when we are talking about the best summary of the principles that the nationalist movement brought to the Constituent Assembly is the objective resolution. Yes, the resolution that defined the aims of the assembly. So this objective resolution moved by Nehru in 1946. So our constitution gave institutional expression to these fundamental commitments like equality, liberty, democracy, sovereignty, and cosmopolitan identity. Thus, our constitution is not merely a maze of these of rules and procedures, but a moral commitment to establish a government that will fulfill the many promises that the nationalist movement held before the people. So here we can say equality, liberty, democracy, sovereignty, and cosmopolitan identity linked with the nationalist movement struggle, that is freedom struggle. So here we'll see the objective resolution moved by Nehru before the Constituent Assembly. So the main points of the objective resolution: like India is an independent sovereign republic. India shall be a union of erstwhile British Indian territories. India state, India states and other parts outside British India, and Indian states as are willing to be part of the union. Territories forming the union shall be autonomous units and exercise all powers and functions of the government and administration except those assigned to or vested in the union. All powers and authority of sovereign and independent India and its constitution shall flow from the people. So all people of India shall be guaranteed and secured social, economic, and political justice. So equality of status and opportunities and equality before law and fundamental freedoms like freedom of speech, expression, belief, faith, worship, vocation, association, and action subject to law and public morality. The minorities backward, the minorities backward and tribal areas, depressed and other backward classes shall be provided adequate safeguards, which means equal opportunity to all. The territorial integrity of the Republic and its sovereign rights on land, sea, and air shall be maintained according to justice and law of civilized nations. And the land would make full and willing contribution to the promotion of world peace and welfare of mankind. So this objective resolution moved by Nehru in 1946 now we'll see the institutional arrangements. So friends, the third factor ensuring effectiveness of a constitution is balanced arrangement of the institutions of government. So the basic principles is that government must be democratic and committed to the welfare of the state or welfare of the people. The Constituent Assembly spent a lot of time on evolving the right balance among the various institutions like the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So this led to an adoption of the parliamentary form and the federal arrangement, which would distribute governmental powers between the legislature and the executive on the one hand, and between the states and the central government on the other hand. So in institutional arrangements, why evolving the most balanced governmental arrangements? The makers of our constitution did not hesitate to learn from experiments and experiences of other countries. Thus, the framers of the constitution were not adverse to borrowing from other constitutional traditions. So, indeed, it is a testament of their wide learning that they could lay their hands upon any intellectual argument or historical example that was necessary to fulfilling the task. So they borrowed a number of provisions from different countries, which means, but borrowing these ideas was not slavish imitation. Far from it, each provision of the constitution had to be defended on grounds that it was suited to Indian problems and aspirations. So India was extremely lucky to have an assembly that, instead of being parochial in its outlook, could take the best available everywhere in the world and make it their own. So, institutional arrangements where the sittings of the Constituent Assembly where discussions on the various provisions which studied from the other countries' constitutions, then the constitution makers convinced to the all members that all these provisions are practical to the people of India, and these provisions will help to solve the concerns of Indian society. The basic principle is that government must be democratic and committed to the welfare of the people assured by the Constituent Assembly. So, here is the cuttings from the NCERT where Dr. B.R. Ambedkar presiding over a discussion in the Constituent Assembly. So, one likes to ask whether there can be anything new in constitution framed at this hour in the history of the world. The only new things, if there can be any, in a constitution framed so late in the day are variations made to remove the faults and to accommodate it to the needs of the country. So, in our constitution, the provisions adopted from constitutions of different countries so provisions adopted from constitutions of different countries like from British Constitution, the provisions of first past the post, parliamentary form of government, the idea of the rule of law, institution of the speaker and role of the speaker, then from Irish Constitution took the provisions like directive principles of state policy, DPSPs. From French Revolution, inspiration from principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. From Canadian Constitution, we took a quasi-federal form of government where a federal system with a strong central government and the idea of residual powers. Then United States Constitution, Charter of Fundamental Rights, power of judicial review and independence of the judiciary. So these provisions are adopted from British, Irish, French, United States and Canadian Constitution. Now, after all these discussions, we come to the conclusion: Constitution, why and who. So it is a tribute to the wisdom and foresight of the makers of the Constitution that they presented to the nation a document that ancient fundamental values and highest aspirations shared by the people. This is one of the reasons why this most intricately crafted document has not only survived but become a living reality. When so many other constitutions have perished with the paper they were first written on. So India's constitution is a unique document which in turn become an exemplar for many other constitutions, mostly notably South Africa. The main procedure behind the long search that went on for almost 3 years was to strike the right balance so that institutions created by the Constitution would not be haphazard or tentative arrangements, but would be able to accommodate the aspirations of the people of India for a long time to come. So now we will discuss more about these arrangements to the remaining parts of the book. Now, just have a recap what we have covered in today's session. So friends, we have started with Indian Constitution at work. Before that, friends, those aspirants are not able to continue their preparation due to financial obstacles or constraints. They can go with loan facility by Unacademy. So you can apply for loan for the preparation on Unacademy platform for UPSC CSE. Here is the link provided and link is in description as well. Then combo subscription you can go with, and our new batches starting from 5th May, so you can attend these batches. So friends, do not forget to enroll yourself for free test series. Unacademy is providing free test series for all aspirants. Just you have to use code RBI Live to unlock these tests where you will cover complete general studies and current affairs part, and here is the biggest free scholarship test for UPSC aspirants, that is Unacademy Combat. We are conducting every Sunday morning 11 a.m. so you can enroll yourself with code RBI Live and it's absolutely free. So in today's session we have covered Indian Constitution at Work, NCERT for 11th standard, where we have started with first chapter, that is Constitution, why and how. We have covered initially fundamental duties, was a part of Article 51A. Then we have covered the introduction. For today's session, like we'll learn about the various institutions of the government. But before understanding these institutions, we should understand the structure of government, where after finishing this chapter, now we have cleared with what a constitution does to the society, how constitutions govern the allocation of power in society, and what was the way in which the Constitution of India was made. Constitution allows coordination and assurance into the society, where we have studied the example of a group, how we comes together with the common agenda. Then why will the group need certain basic rules to live in the society? So the first function of a constitution is to provide a set of basic rules that allow what minimal coordination among members of a society. Then specifications of decision making powers. For example, in monarchical constitution, a monarch decides for the rules and regulations in the country. In some countries like old Soviet Union, one single party was given the power to decide these basic rules for the nation. And in democratic type of constitution, democratic governments, in their constitution, they broadly speaking the people to get to decide about their rules and regulations and basic rules. So in our country, Parliament gets to decide laws and policies, and that Parliament itself be organized in a particular manner. The second function of a constitution is to specify who has the power to make decisions in a society. It decides how the government will be constituted. Then we have covered limitations on the powers of government. Then the third function of a constitution is to set some limits on what a government can impose on its citizens, and these limits are fundamental in the sense that government may never trespass them. So citizens will normally have the right to some basic liberties like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, and freedom of conduct. Yes, freedom to conduct a trade or business. Then we have covered aspirations and goals of a society. The aspirations like members of society or citizens will get equal opportunity and they will get basic needs like minimum material well-being and education, etc., with the minimal dignity and social self-respect. Yes, the citizens also, they will get section of fundamental rights and DBSPs in our constitution. So the fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society. The fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society and create conditions for a just society. Yes, Aditya will conduct next session on Monday afternoon. So keep updating, or you can join our Telegram group. You will get update regarding this. So next session, that is part 2, is scheduled on Monday afternoon. So please join Telegram group. We'll update you about the sessions. Now, the fourth function of a constitution is to enable the government to fulfill the aspirations of a society and create conditions for a just society. And we have covered enabling provisions of the constitution. So friends, in this marathon series, I know we are taking on low pace. Yes, maybe some of friends getting bored with the pace of this are covering NCERT, but believe me, definitely it will help you to understand the concept in this speed, because we have to work on concept clarity or conceptual clarity with the topics covered in NCERT. So friends, keep patience, because our civil services preparation, it's all about patience. So fundamental identity of people we have covered. So like individual aspirations, goal and freedoms is also empowering various things to be discussed. Sorry. So there are many basic political and moral values are shared across different constitutional traditions. So our Indian constitution does not make any ethnic identity a criteria for citizenship, as some countries have their criteria for citizenship on ethnic basis. Then we have covered the authority of a constitution, mode of promulgation. Then we have covered debate over constitution making in Nepal. Then substantive provisions of a constitution and balanced institutional design. Then we have covered what was the Indian Constitution made. So all the aspects of Constituent Assembly and the Constituent Assembly was composed roughly along the lines suggested by the plan proposed by Committee of the British Cabinet, which is also known as Cabinet Mission. Then composition of Constituent Assembly we have covered. The principle of deliberation and procedures we have covered. Inheritance of the nationalist movement, and the main points of the objective resolution moved by Nehru in 1946. How our constitution makers interlinked the freedom movement or struggles, teachings or experience with drafting our constitution. Then we have covered institutional arrangements, like the constitution is talked about the executive, the legislature and judiciary, their independence. And then we have covered the provisions adopted from constitutions of different countries like British Constitution, Irish Constitution, United States Constitution and Canadian Constitution. But our constitution framers convinced to the all members of the Constituent Assembly on these provisions how practically feasible in our nation to adopt in our constitution to become democratic nation. Then we covered the conclusion. So friends, that's it for today's session. Now we'll meet you on next series of this NCERT part 2 very soon, that is on Monday. So do not forget to attend this lecture. Friends, please join our Telegram group. I have mentioned link. So please like, share and subscribe videos of Unacademy. We will help you to achieve your goal in Civil Services Examination. Now it's time to take care of your near dear ones during the COVID pandemic. So it's a request to stay home, stay safe, take care and all the best.